happening in the maritime and logistics sector in India and how the sector is going to unfold for next 10 years for us. Now, what the format is, we have certain slides which we will share with you. On the video conferencing, we have a Hamraport CEO, Mr. Mahapatra. He will be coming in maybe in 5 to 10 minutes time. And then probably we can ask him a few questions. So the guys from the finance side and the people from the industry side. And the idea is to brainstorm and really understand where the sector is going. We are sharing with you some of our insights about the sector and some of these insights are very shocking to us also in terms of size and in terms of the volumes of the industry that it can become. What time we could get another 5 minutes we can get him on the thing. Okay. Now I really like this quotation. Probably this. Shakespeare, of course, said it, but it's very apt for the situation now because looking at what is happening in the logistics sector and the kind of opportunity which is going to unfold with us, it will be, we did some estimation, it will be bigger than IT and telecom combined, and we'll work with that. Okay, this is another very interesting theory that we have been working on and which has come from that the growth, the economic growth processes in around the world, they have been shifting towards the west side. So if you look at it, industrialization started in Europe and from there they have been shifting westward. In the middle of probably 17th century, Austria and those regions were the first one to get into the industrialization. And Europe grew by around 1 to 2% over a very long span of 150 to 200 years. And then it shifted to UK, which became the major naval power, as well as the growth rates further accelerated. So what is happening is, as you can see this line, as the industrialization or the economic growth is moving westward, the growths are getting accelerated, and the time frames are compressing. So UK, it grew by almost 3%, or it was over a longer time horizon, and from there the growth shifted to North America, and there again North America was funded by European capital, and it grew faster than what Europe grew, and in a slightly compressed time zone. It crossed Pacific, came to Japan, and which grew much faster. Again from 50s to 70s, the growth rate was very high. Subsequently, it went to Southeast Asia and then China. China, for example, has been growing by 13% in last 10 years. So what is happening interestingly is that the time span is reducing and the growth is accelerating. And if you look at this, it's right knocking at India. And we in fact presented a paper, and you have a copy of that paper here, where we forecasted almost 2 years back India would grow faster than China and in a shorter time span. And many other people didn't believe. But the events which have unfolded in the last 2 years seems to be indicating that India can really grow faster than what China has done in the last 10 years. Another interesting thing is that the way North America was funded and financed by capital from Europe, the early pioneers of industrialization were Protestants and Calvinists who had ethics code where they were working very hard. Now a similar kind of thing is happening where North America is actually funding the Indian growth. If you look at the most of the capital that is being raised either in capital markets or through private equity is coming from North America. And interestingly, if you look at first half of 20th century, the two major powers of the world were Germany and UK. And UK was liberal, more egalitarian democracy, and Germany was controlled by Nazis, and it's a very autocratic system. The next 50 years, after they fought with each other for the colonies, the power of Axis shifted to US and USSR. Again, a very similar system. US was more liberal, democratic, and Russia was very autocratic and very heavy-handed. So it was equal to what Germany was in terms of Nazis. Now, the Cold War is over now, and again the axis of power is shifting from US. It's sort of coming to India, which is again a democratic, liberal, free kind of system, and you have in China, which is more autocratic, authoritarian. So it seems that next 50 years, these two powers, and every time there's a factor of 5. Like US and USSR, they were respectively 5 times bigger than, 5 to 4 times bigger than UK and Germany. And in a similar way, India and China are again 5 times bigger than USA and so these are just simple observations, but putting all that together, it seems that India could grow very rapidly, and the growth could be even faster than what has been experienced in China. And especially today, capital is not an issue. There are people from the financing side, and they would proclaim that if people have ideas and plans, companies like Bharti, Telecom, Reliance, they have grown in 1 decade very rapidly. And from Bharti used to be a 25 crore revenue company, and it has grown probably more than 100,000-fold today. So that kind of growth is possible. So next 1 decade, we have done some estimations of how the logistics sector is likely to grow and what is going to happen. So what's the sort of thing? Okay, now this is a very interesting slide. In fact, actually, this is one single slide which is probably the most important thing, and you can if you yeah. See, today's GDP is around $750 billion, Indian GDP, and it's growing at around 9%. Next 5 years, we expect it to grow that much. Beyond that, we feel it could grow even faster than that. And by 2016, we'll be close to around $2 trillion. Now, this is a bit deceptive in terms of these numbers, because in terms of PPP terms, the economy is actually growing much faster, or the size is much bigger. Now, it's very debatable, because what happens in some number, if you look at IT sector in India, all top 4 IT companies put together, they're generating around $10 billion in terms of revenue, but their market cap is close to around $70 billion. While in US, the top 4 companies, EDS, Accenture, and many of these, they close to command $60 billion as a revenue, while their market cap is less than the top 4 companies in India. Indian companies are much more profitable than the American companies as a percentage of revenue, as a return on equity. So though Indian companies, in terms of in IT sector, for example, they don't really capture because the dollar rate per hour is around 20-25 for Indian companies, while for bigger IT companies it is much more. But when it comes to value, the very large value gets created, even though the revenues are lesser. So India's GDP is not really that. Actually, the 750 is 5 times bigger. It's around $3.5 trillion currently. And this $2 trillion will be equal to around $10 to $12 trillion. So it's in another 10 years, in terms of the human activity and the GDP, if it measures the human dimension of the physical activity, we will be having another USA out here, which means the growth rate which is going to happen in India will be, our economy within 10 years will be as big as United